I want to be clear about something before I tell you this. I am not the kind of person this happens to. I have a master's degree in software engineering. I have spent the better part of a decade building systems that other people rely on. Secure systems, encrypted systems. Systems designed specifically to resist manipulation and intrusion. I understand how things work at a level most people never even think about. I understand code. I understand patterns. I understand the specific mathematical ways that human beings can be deceived by things that look like one thing, but are actually another. I say all of this not to impress you. I say it because I need you to understand that when I tell you what happened to me, when I walk you through every agonizing step of how I ended up in that room in front of that thing, you cannot dismiss it as the story of someone who was naive, someone who should have known better, someone who didn't have the tools to see what was coming. I had every tool. I saw nothing coming. And now I am sitting in my apartment at 2 in the morning, writing this down, because my life is no longer my own. I have been asking myself the questions I have been avoiding for years. What did they do to me? What did I help them unleash? And most importantly, what is happening to me now? I need someone to know what happened, in case I stop being able to tell it. It started with a single image of a cicada, a black background, simple white text. It started the way most things start for people like me. Late at night, staring at a screen, trying to distract myself from another evening of insomnia. I was scrolling through a cryptography subreddit when somebody posted it. They wrote about it as if it were just something mildly interesting, completely unaware of the rabbit hole it would lead to. The message on the image was simple. We are looking for highly intelligent individuals. This is a test. Below that was a string of random-looking numbers and letters, just sitting there, like a dare. I don't know what made me save it to my desktop. Maybe it was pure boredom. Or maybe it was the voice in my head that said, "You've always been good at puzzles. Why not try? Let's put that master's degree to use." At first, I thought the image was just a clever decoy, just white text on a black background, designed to trick arrogant people into wasting hours chasing nothing. But when I opened it in a hex editor, looking at the raw data underneath the image, the truth started to reveal itself. Among the strings of data buried in the metadata, I found a clue. A URL leading to an unassuming web page with a single image of a rubber duck. My stomach sank. Trolled, I thought. But then I remembered something from an old forum post about steganography. The practice of hiding information not in the code of the image, but inside the pixel data itself. Changes in color, so microscopic they are invisible to the human eye, but readable to the right tool. The message wasn't in the image. The message was the image. A free online decoder exposed the hidden text. A long string that looked like gibberish at first glance, but when run through an XOR cipher, resolved into another URL. By this point, I wasn't the only one working through the puzzles. Reddit was going wild. The mystery was spreading like wildfire. After the first couple of puzzles were solved, the atmosphere shifted. This wasn't just some clever college kid making puzzles to troll forums. There seemed to be a massive, well-funded architecture behind all of it. The second URL led to a page of plain black text on a white background. "Congratulations," it read. "You have made it this far, but there is still a long way to go." Below the message was another string of text, a Caesar cipher. Shifting the letters back by a set number revealed a cryptic reference to a line in the Mabinogion, an old collection of Welsh mythology. I didn't own a physical copy, but I found a scanned version online. My hands hovered over the keyboard, fumbling slightly as I searched for the specific passage. The solution wasn't in the words themselves, but in the specific placement of the letters. That careful pattern revealed yet another URL. The next page wasn't as simple. Instead of text, it hosted an audio file, low, distorted, a humming sound that made the back of my neck prickle. I ran it through a spectrogram analyzer, a tool that transforms sound frequencies into a visual image. Hidden inside the audio waves was a string of numbers that looked exactly like GPS coordinates. By this time, I was completely obsessed. I punched the numbers into Google Maps, half expecting to end up in the middle of an ocean. Instead, they pointed to a street corner in Warsaw, Poland. Of course, I wasn't going to fly to Poland, but I didn't have to. Other people working on the puzzle shared images of the clue they found at that exact coordinate, a laminated poster taped to a light pole, featuring the same black and white cicada imagery and a QR code. Scanning the code led to another page, requiring a PGP key to decrypt. That's when I realized the puzzles weren't just about individual intelligence. People in forums were collaborating, spreading across the globe like a network. One solved cipher led to another set of coordinates, and then another. Each piece made us feel closer to answering the larger question. What is this really? But the more I solved, the more isolated I became. I decoded the PGP key that unlocked the next step, and I kept it to myself. I kept moving. The final puzzle cycle felt different. It wasn't just a code to break or a text to decrypt. It was a test of endurance, patience, and precision. The PGP key I had received weeks earlier acted as a gatekeeper, verifying my identity and granting me access to an unlisted Tor page. The page was bare. A single black screen with a string of numbers that had no immediate meaning. Hours turned into days. I chased down every possible lead, cross-referencing them with literature, mathematical sequences, and star charts. I decoded segments using passages pulled from Agrippa by William Gibson. I pushed further, unlocking the final sequence using the Book of Soiga, a 16th century treatise on magic and the occult. The decryption revealed a single email address. Plain, unspectacular. My hands were trembling. I sent a blank message to the address. I received a reply within seconds, not 5 minutes. Seconds. As if someone had been sitting there, waiting for me. You have come far, but the journey is not over. Welcome. And then the page disappeared. My screen went dark, leaving me staring at my own exhausted reflection in the monitor, anxious to see what would happen next. For a moment, I wondered if I had made some mistake, if I had been kicked out, or worse, if the whole thing had just been one giant, elaborate hoax. But as I sat in thought, I heard the faintest of clicks. The green LED light on my webcam turned on. What the? I whispered quietly to myself, frozen in my chair. The light only stayed on for a few seconds before clicking back off. Up until this point, I had been going from goal to goal, fueled entirely by obsession and curiosity. But with it now seemingly complete, the gratification was rapidly wearing off. A cold, heavy feeling of regret was creeping in. Was all this just a waste of time? What did I just allow into my life? What if this was an illegal syndicate? I convinced myself it had been nothing. A driver malfunction, a glitch. I told myself it was time to move on, take a break from the internet. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. My life went back to normal. It didn't last long. I was getting off work, walking home like usual. The same streets, the same turns. While walking, I started to notice a man in a black suit following behind me. No tie, blank expression. He kept a steady pace, making every single turn that I made. It felt weird, but I shrugged it off. It's a city. There are a lot of people. I stopped to pick up some food at a grocery store on the way. But as I walked in, I noticed a second guy in a dark suit standing near the entrance. He wasn't shopping, he was just standing there, waiting, staring directly in my direction. I tried to push the dread out of my mind and just do my shopping. But while I was in the third aisle, I saw a third man in a suit. He walked right past me. He looked directly into my eyes, a deliberate, unblinking stare, and then kept going. He didn't stop. He didn't say anything. By this time, the panic was setting in. I was positive I was being watched. I hurried through the checkout and left the store. As I walked down the street, I saw the first guy again. A few paces behind me, same unhurried pace, keeping his distance. I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I broke into a run, wanting nothing more than the safety of my apartment. I rushed upstairs, locked the deadbolt, and stood by the window, trying to catch my breath. I peeked down at the street below. My heart stopped. A black SUV with tinted windows had pulled up slowly in front of my building, and then it just stopped. I couldn't see who was inside, but I knew they were there for me. I knew it had to do with the puzzles. I knew it was something illegal, I thought. The FBI, a cartel, something. And then I heard it. 2 firm knocks at my door. I crept to the peephole. 2 men in suits stood in the hallway, staring directly at the door. Not at each other, at the door, like they knew I was on the other side holding my breath. I backed away, my heart pounding against my ribs. I ignored it, hoping they would just go away. But a few hours later, another knock, the same 2 men. Every few hours, the knocks would come. Always the same rhythm. No words, no warning, just the sound of knuckles against wood, patient, relentless. I called out of work for the next couple of days, refusing to go outside. The SUV did not move an inch. The food in my apartment dwindled down to nothing. It was the end of the weekend, and I knew I couldn't call out of work again without losing my job. Knowing I had no choice, I unlocked the deadbolt and left my apartment. As soon as my boots reached the sidewalk, the doors of the black SUV clicked open. The 2 men stepped out, moving toward me with unreadable purpose. I froze. My blood ran completely cold. One of them spoke. His voice was flat and direct. "We need you to come with us." Panic hit me like a physical wave. A lump formed in my throat, tears welling in my eyes. I opened my mouth to protest. All my intelligence completely gone, leaving only a desperate stammer. I didn't do anything. You've got the wrong person." "I don't." He raised a hand, cutting me off. "Relax," he said, his tone calm but insistent. "You're not in any trouble. We're the ones you've been interacting with online. We need you to come with us. I assure you, you are not in any danger." I don't know why, but I believed him. Maybe it was the total calmness in his voice, or maybe it was the exhaustion. Without a word, I nodded and climbed into the back seat. Instantly, one of the men handed me a black sleep mask and a pair of heavy headphones. The music playing through them was soft and classical. But the gesture was not a suggestion. "It's just our policy," he assured me. As a precaution, I put the mask on, then the headphones. The classical music filtered in, smooth and steady. But my analytical mind saw right through what they were doing. Classical music, with its intricate, highly layered structure, is mathematically designed to flood the auditory cortex. Sound plays a crucial role in helping your brain orient itself in physical space. Your ears pick up on tiny environmental cues, that allow you to determine direction even without seeing. By flooding my senses with complex string arrangements, they were throwing off my internal compass. They were blocking my ability to track the turns, the stops, and the geography of the city. I was completely erased from the map. Eventually, the car stopped. A hand grabbed my forearm, guiding me out. The ground shifted from concrete to thick carpet. The air pressure changed. We were in an elevator, moving upward for an impossibly long time, way longer than any standard building. I started to freak out, wondering if they were taking me to a roof to throw me off. But then the elevator stopped. The doors opened. They removed the mask and headphones. I blinked against the harsh light. I was standing in a massive, hyper-upscale penthouse. Everything about the room screamed extreme, unmonitored wealth. Polished marble floors, shelves packed with priceless artwork and ancient books, a massive crystal chandelier, and deep, blood-red curtains covering every single window, completely blocking out the cityscape. It was another deliberate measure to ensure I couldn't pinpoint our location. The men in suits positioned themselves by the door, standing like statues. But at the far end of the room, sitting in a plush leather chair, was an eccentric older man. He was dressed in a flawlessly tailored suit, his gray hair wild, his eyes sharp and studying me. He had a completely different vibe than the security team. He was almost childlike in his enthusiasm. "Well, well, well," he said, clapping his hands with an exaggerated, theatrical flair. "The young puzzle solver, you cracked the code. I must say, I had my doubts, but I have never been so impressed. You are something special." I hesitated, swept up in his strange energy. "Thanks," I muttered. "Everything has just been really weird." He laughed, a booming, dismissive sound. "Oh, let's not focus on the strange bits. You're here now, and I think we can make this night memorable. Come, let's eat. You've earned it." He led me to a long, dark cherrywood table. What followed was a dinner beyond anything I could have imagined. A delicate lobster bisque with truffle oil, seared foie gras with a sweet fig reduction, a perfectly marbled Wagyu beef steak with a tangy balsamic glaze that melted on the tongue, and a rich dark chocolate soufflé for dessert. By the time I finished, the sheer decadence of the meal had entranced me. The cheap takeout lifestyle I was used to felt a million miles away. The old man stood up with a flourish. He walked to a side table, pulled out 2 perfectly banded stacks of cash, $10,000 each, and set them down right in front of me. "A token of appreciation for your work," he said, patting my shoulder. To him, it was pocket change. To me, it was life-changing. But then, his demeanor shifted entirely. His voice dropped to a low, intense whisper. "But there is more, of course. There is another puzzle we need cracked. One that has been eluding my associates and me for a very long time. We are offering you a sum of money, far more than what you see here, to crack this final puzzle for us." The challenge, the allure of the money, the absolute validation of my own ego, I couldn't resist. "Yeah," I nodded slowly. "I'll do it," he smiled wildly. "Good, we will be in touch soon. Remember, there is a lot more where that came from." They drove me home that night, the weight of $20,000 heavy in my jacket. For days I heard nothing. I just sat in my apartment, waiting, completely consumed by the thought of what was coming next. When the black SUV finally returned, I didn't hesitate. I walked right up to it, trying to sound casual as I greeted the suits. They didn't respond. They just handed me the sleep mask and the headphones. The routine was the same. But the journey was different. After a short drive, I was guided up a set of narrow stairs and into a seat. It wasn't until I felt the heavy, muffled vibrations rattling my chest and the sudden sensation of the ground disappearing beneath me that I realized where I was. We were in the air. I was sitting inside a private jet. Whatever this operation was, it was massive. This wasn't just some bored billionaire playing internet games. Whatever they wanted me to break was worth an absolute fortune to them. Hours later, after landing and another blindfolded drive, the mask was finally removed. The sun was blinding. The air smelled sharp, like wet grass and dirt. I was standing in a vast, isolated stretch of rolling green hills, and right in front of me stood a massive, ancient stone structure. It looked like a giant, abandoned Catholic church. The exterior was weathered, choked with overgrown ivy. But the moment we stepped through the heavy wooden doors, it was a different world. The cold stone was hidden behind rich tapestries and thick, expensive curtains. The floors were polished marble, lit by elegant fixtures. It was a high-end luxury fortress, disguised as a ruin. Dozens of people in dark suits stood around the room, talking in hushed tones. When I walked in, all conversation died. Every eye turned to me. The eccentric old man rushed forward, his face lit up with disturbing excitement. "Welcome to our little hideaway. The others have been waiting anxiously for your arrival so that we may finally get started." "Get started on what?" I asked. He walked to a large oak table and carefully opened a velvet case. Inside was a thick, ancient manuscript. The pages were yellowed, frayed, filling the air with the musty scent of centuries-old decay. This manuscript was discovered in a remote, forgotten monastery in Syria, he whispered, all theatricality gone. It is believed to have been authored by a group who guarded advanced, forbidden knowledge. It has baffled cryptographers for hundreds of years. But it is more than a code. It is a key. I looked at the page. The writing was unlike anything I had ever seen. Intricate symbols flowing into bizarre shapes and mathematical patterns. Some resembled ancient Sumerian, others archaic Latin, but many were completely alien. They showed me to a windowless bedroom and left me alone. I stayed in that room for days. They brought decadent meals, but I barely touched them. The first few days were a blur of absolute failure. Every time I thought I made a breakthrough, I hit a dead end. I was losing my mind. Then, on the fourth night of total sleep deprivation, I saw it. I was staring at an anomalous star chart on the page when I realized that a specific symbol throwing off my calculations was actually a forgotten alchemical sign. Suddenly, the system revealed its true architecture. It wasn't a code meant to be read linearly. It was a blending of disciplines. The sequence was tied to astronomical charts, ancient number theory, and geometric ratios. Certain symbols only made sense when read backwards, others only when mirrored. I became a madman. I took a ruler, a protractor, and a compass, sketching out patterns across the walls. I was putting the bones together, and then the terrifying reality of what I was looking at finally clicked. This wasn't an abstract riddle. It was a formula, an ancient, hyper-precise recipe. The constellations, the angles, the numbers. They were a step-by-step process requiring specific physical ingredients and precise actions. The measurements weren't in grams or cups, but in forgotten geometric ratios. It wasn't a message. It was a manual for a ritual. My heart raced so violently I thought it would burst. The door to my mind flew wide open. I burst out of my room, throwing the heavy doors open, practically screaming into the main hall. Eureka! I cracked it. The entire room froze. The men in suits turned around, their eyes widening in shock. They gathered around me in a suffocating, silent circle as I laid my sketches across the marble table. I explained the findings piece by piece, layer by layer. They didn't interrupt. They didn't breathe. But as the final steps of the formula unfolded before them, their expressions shifted. It wasn't admiration. It was something dark, a look of terrifying realization. They knew what I had uncovered wasn't just a historical discovery. It was a weapon. One of the men broke the silence, his voice sharp and devoid of all warmth. "We must get started right away. Do not waste a single second." Instantly, the fortress erupted into a frenzy. Men shouting in hushed tones, sending encrypted data, moving with a desperate, terrifying purpose. I stood frozen in the chaos, realizing exactly what kind of door I had just unlocked. I walked up to the old man, my voice shaking with sarcasm to mask my dread. "So, what now? Do I get paid or something?" He turned to me, a wide, fervor-filled grin on his face. "Money? Oh, consider that handled. But what you really get is a front row seat to something far bigger than you could ever imagine." Hours passed. Strangers came and went carrying crates of equipment I couldn't identify. Eventually, I was led into a massive room. The walls were paneled with sleek black wood that absorbed all the light. The floor was polished black stone. The men filed in one by one, no talking. A man walked to the center, holding a stack of small black boxes, handing one to each person. They opened them, pulling out carefully folded, blood-red robes. Without hesitation, they put them on. The vibrant red contrasting sharply against the black room. That was the moment it truly clicked. This wasn't an intelligence agency. This wasn't an eccentric billionaires club. It was a cult. And I had just translated the instructions they needed to bring their god into this world. The ritual began with low, rhythmic chanting. The words were guttural, unnatural, pulling from an ancient nightmare. The men moved in perfect unison, following my precise geometrical instructions. The flames of the candles began to shift unnaturally, bending and twisting, pulled by an unseen force. The chanting grew louder, frantic. A swirling mass of smoke and fire erupted in the center of the room. It grew rapidly, turning into a horrifying shape that defied all logic. An entity pulled itself through the flames. Its head was a grotesque mix of a wolf and a goat, its fiery eyes glowing with ancient malice. Its body was covered in coarse, dark hair, standing on inverted, nightmarish legs. The room filled with a stench of rot and burning sulfur so overpowering it made my stomach churn. Suddenly, hands grabbed me from behind. Two of the robed men dragged me forward, their grips like iron. "What are you doing? Let me go!" I screamed, thrashing wildly, but they held me tight, dragging me toward the creature. Tears streamed down my face. One of the men stepped forward, his voice reverent and booming. "O mighty Yamu, we resurrect you. We bring you a brilliant mind and a strong body for you to possess. Accept this offering and bestow upon us your power." The entity moved closer. Its massive, clawed hands reached out toward me. I could feel its unnatural heat. I begged to God, to Jesus, to anyone who would listen. The creature's hands landed on my face. The pain was searing, consuming my entire existence. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life, and then absolute darkness. I woke up in my apartment. Everything was eerily normal. The silence was deafening. My head throbbed, but I was alive. I ran to the bathroom mirror, fully expecting to see my face burned or mutated, but I looked completely normal. I walked back into my living room. Neatly stacked by the front door were several heavy black briefcases. I opened the first one. It was stuffed with crisp, tightly packed stacks of cash, millions of dollars. I never heard from any of them again. No phone calls, no emails, no black SUV parked on the street. The money was real. It changed everything. I paid off my debts. I moved into a better place. For a few years, I convinced myself that it was just a nightmare, that I had somehow survived and come out ahead. But then the blackouts started. At first, they were small. I would wake up on the couch, unsure of how I got there. I chalked it up to stress. But then it got worse. I started losing hours, then full days. I would be out grocery shopping, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in my bed, shoes still on, with zero memory of how I got home. Lately, I've been waking up in strange places. An alleyway, a park bench in the middle of the night, dirt under my fingernails. I have no memory of the gaps. I have no idea what my body is doing while my mind is turned off. I have been asking myself the questions I have been avoiding since that night in the black room. What did they do to me? What did I help them pull through that door? And most terrifying of all, when I am not awake, who is in control of my mind? I am an engineer. When a system behaves unpredictably, you do not just sit back and panic. You monitor it. You isolate the variables. You gather data. If my body was acting on its own while my consciousness was dark, I needed to see what it was doing. I spent a portion of the cult's money on surveillance equipment, high-end offline, closed-loop systems. I bought infrared cameras, motion sensors, and audio recorders. I mounted them in the corners of my living room, my kitchen, and directly above my bed. I rigged my laptop with a hardware keylogger to record every single keystroke, and I stitched a microscopic GPS tracker into the lining of my favorite jacket and the soles of my shoes. If I was leaving the apartment during these blackouts, I was going to map exactly where this thing was taking me. I set the system to record continuously to an encrypted local server hidden in my floorboards. And then I waited. It took 11 days for the next blackout to hit. I was sitting at my kitchen island at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, drinking a glass of water. The next thing I knew, the harsh morning light was blinding me. I was lying face down on my living room rug. My throat was completely raw, feeling like I had swallowed broken glass. I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I ran to the floorboards, pulled out the hidden server, and plugged it into my offline monitor. My hands shook as I scrubbed through the timeline, watching myself drink the water at 8 p.m. And then, at exactly 8:14, I saw it happen. On the screen, my body went entirely rigid. The glass of water slipped from my hand, shattering on the tile. I stood there, completely motionless, for over 20 minutes. I didn't blink. I didn't shift my weight. I just stared blankly at the wall. Then, my posture changed. It is a terrifying thing to watch your own body move in a way that is not yours. The spine straightened unnaturally. The shoulders rolled back. The head tilted to the side in a sharp, jerky motion, like a marionette being pulled by an amateur puppeteer. The thing inside me walked toward my computer desk. The gait was wrong, heavy, arrogant. It sat down, opened my laptop, and began to type. I switched the video feed to the camera mounted above the desk. I watched myself stare into the monitor. My face was completely devoid of human expression, my eyes wide and unblinking. But my fingers were flying across the keyboard at a speed I didn't even know I was physically capable of. I watched the clock on the video feed. The entity sat there, typing without a single pause for 6 straight hours. It never stretched. It never looked away. It operated my body like a piece of heavy machinery, pushing it to its absolute physical limits. At 4 in the morning, the thing stood up, walked to the center of the living room, and collapsed face first onto the rug. 4 hours later, the real me woke up. I paused the video. My shirt was soaked in cold sweat. I pulled the data from the hardware keylogger, desperate to see what it had been typing for 6 hours. I expected to find ancient Sumerian text. I expected phonetic spellings of guttural chants, or mad ramblings of a displaced demon. I was wrong. It was code, tens of thousands of lines of flawless, hyper-complex code. I stared at the screen, a new kind of terror washing over me. Yamu wasn't just a mindless beast from the Syrian desert. It was ancient, yes, but it was highly intelligent. And when it possessed me during that ritual, it didn't just take my body, it gained access to my mind, my memories, my decade of cybersecurity experience. It knew what the internet was. It understood networks. It understood encryption. The cult hadn't just given their god a physical vessel. They had given it the mind of a master software engineer. They brought a centuries-old entity into the 21st century and armed it with the exact tools it needed to weaponize the modern world. I spent the next 3 days analyzing the code my possessed body had written. It was beautiful, and it was deeply, fundamentally malicious. It was a polymorphic worm, a self-replicating virus designed to infiltrate secure networks and constantly rewrite its own structure to avoid detection. But it wasn't designed to steal credit card numbers or crash financial markets. It was designed to hunt. Hidden deep within the architecture of the virus was a digital echo of the ritual I had translated at the stone church. The code was using algorithmic geometry to replicate the ancient symbols. It was converting the astrological star charts and alchemical ratios into server ping intervals and bandwidth frequencies. The entity was building a digital temple. And then I found the payload. The virus was scraping the dark web, cybersecurity forums, and underground subreddits. It was deploying a new image, a black background, white text, a new puzzle. It was recruiting. The cult didn't need to post clues on light poles in Poland anymore. The entity was automating the process. It was hunting for thousands of highly intelligent, obsessive minds across the globe. Minds that couldn't resist a puzzle. Minds that would unwittingly download the geometric virus into their own systems, turning their computers into nodes for a massive, worldwide ritual. I tried to delete the code. I highlighted the files, hit the command, and watched the progress bar fill up. A text box popped up on my screen. Access denied. I frantically typed in my administrator passwords. I tried to force wipe the hard drive. I even tried to physically smash the laptop with a hammer, but my arms wouldn't move. I stood there, in my living room, the hammer gripped in my right hand, suspended in the air. I tried to swing it down onto the keyboard. My muscles locked. A searing, white-hot pain shot through the base of my skull. My own body was fighting me. The entity wasn't just taking over during the blackouts anymore. It was awake, it was watching, and it was protecting its work. I dropped the hammer. The pain in my skull instantly vanished. I was a prisoner in my own flesh. I pulled out my phone and checked the GPS logs from my jacket. The tracking data showed that during a blackout 3 weeks ago, my body had rented a massive, abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. The financial records showed that I had wired millions of dollars from the cult's briefcases to shell companies, purchasing industrial-grade server racks, cooling systems, and massive fiber optic arrays. My alter ego was building a physical hub for the digital ritual, a server farm designed to process the geometric equations necessary to pull something massive through the veil. If one vessel could house Yamu, what would a global, digitally synchronized ritual bring through? An entire legion. I realized I couldn't go to the police. What would I tell them? That a goat-headed demon was writing malware in my living room. They would lock me in a psychiatric ward, which is exactly what the entity would want. A quiet, contained space where it could completely take over without interference. I had to stop it myself. I formulated a plan. The entity had my skills, but it lacked my human intuition. It operated on cold, ancient logic, married to strict algorithmic patterns. If I couldn't fight it digitally, and I couldn't fight it physically, I had to break the hardware, not the computers, the warehouse. I gathered every piece of combustible material I could find in my apartment. Cleaning chemicals, aerosol cans, high-proof alcohol. I packed them into a duffel bag. If I could get to the warehouse while I was still in control, I could burn the server farm to the ground. I could sever the physical hub before the worldwide ritual could execute. I waited until the early afternoon, a time when the blackouts rarely occurred. I put on my jacket, slung the duffel bag over my shoulder, and reached for the doorknob. A heavy, guttural vibration echoed through my apartment. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling, a deep, bone-rattling frequency that made my teeth ache. I looked at the television screen in my living room. It was turned off, but the black glass was reflecting my reflection perfectly. Only, it wasn't my reflection. The body in the glass was mine, but the posture was the rigid, arrogant stance from the security tapes. The eyes looking back at me were not human. They were glowing, burning with a fiery, ancient malice. The reflection smiled. My vision blurred. The edges of the room turned black. I fought it. I dug my fingernails into my palms until they bled, trying to anchor myself to the physical pain. I screamed, thrashing against the invisible weight, pressing down on my consciousness. "No," I yelled. "Not now. Get out of my head." But the cold, suffocating darkness poured in. The last thing I heard before my mind went entirely blank was my own voice speaking in that unnatural, guttural language, whispering a single, horrifying phrase. "The door is already open." That was 3-2 ago. Which brings me to right now, 2 in the morning, sitting in my apartment, typing this document. When I finally woke up from this last blackout, the duffel bag of chemicals was gone. My jacket was completely ruined, covered in thick black grease and smelling heavily of smoke and copper. And that is when I realized I was missing 14 hours. 14 hours I cannot account for. I woke up on my kitchen floor with my shoes on and dried blood under my fingernails that I know is not mine. I don't know whose blood it is. I don't know where my body went, but I know what it accomplished. I opened my laptop 30 minutes ago. The polymorphic virus is gone from my local drive. The server connections have all been severed. I checked the underground cryptography forums, the subreddits, the Tor boards. They are exploding. Hundreds of thousands of users are posting screenshots of a new image, a black background, a white geometric symbol, and a string of alphanumeric text. The recruitment has begun. The digital ritual has been deployed to the masses, and the entire global network is currently crunching the ancient math required to finish what the cult started in that Syrian monastery. I tried to pull the plug on my router. I tried to sever my connection to the internet entirely. But the green light on my laptop's webcam just turned on. It's staring at me. Even with the Wi-Fi disabled, even with the Ethernet cable physically ripped from the wall, the green light is glowing. It isn't a glitch. It isn't a hacker. It is the entity. It is Yamu. It doesn't need the physical internet anymore. Because the network is no longer made of code. It's made of the millions of minds currently staring at that puzzle, obsessing over it, trying to crack the code, letting the geometry take root in their own brains. I am writing this as a warning. I want to be clear about something. I am not the kind of person this happens to. I had every tool. I saw nothing coming. And if you are listening to this, if you are the kind of person who likes puzzles, the kind of person who goes through forums late at night, looking for something to challenge your intelligence, if you see an image with a black background and white text, do not save it. Do not look at the metadata. Do not try to crack the cipher, because they are no longer looking for highly intelligent individuals to solve a puzzle. They are looking for vessels, and the door is already open.